Imagine this. You go to work for a brand new radio station. It's a flamethrower signal, and your owner only has one thing in mind, and that's to be number one. No budget limitations. You pick the air staff, the research, the music, and everything else about the product. Now, given these guidelines, the question is, what would you do? Hi, I'm AC Programming Specialist Gary Berkowitz, and this is What Would You Do? All part of my 21 for 21 programming video series. In the first What Would You Do segment, my guest is Don Kelley, former program director at one of the country's most important and influential AC radio stations, Magic 106.7 in Boston. Don is a veteran broadcast programmer with over 40 years in radio and television. He's programmed stations in Boston, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Syracuse, West Palm Beach, and several other markets. He's also consulted sister stations in Washington, Detroit, New Jersey, and New York, as well as done international work for stations in Ireland, Spain, and Japan. One of Don's greatest achievements are being number one 2554 in Nielsen rating books a total of 55 times. It's a national record, and 44 of those number one books came during his 22 years as Vice President and Director of Programming at Magic 106.7 in Boston. So great signal, no budget, nobody in the way. Don Kelley, what would you do? I am so excited to have veteran programmer Don Kelley with me today. And for those of you who don't know Don, hopefully my introduction gave you better insight as to what Don has done. But Don and I worked together in Boston at Magic 106.7 for, Don, would you say about 18 or so years?
Something like that, yeah.
And I will say that I hope, Don, that you got something out of me over those years. But I will tell you, I got a lot out of working with you. You were one of the trailblazers of AC radio for your years there. Your rating success is undeniable. So I'm very, very excited to have you today on the first installment of What Would You Do? And the thought process going into this was, everybody is complaining about radio and what's wrong with radio. And it dawned on me that, okay, I would rather concentrate on what's right about radio. And I think if you're going to do that, you've really got to take a blank piece of paper and you've got to say, okay, if I could, what would I do to make it great again? And I don't think that there's anybody, Don, more creative and more experienced in radio and knowing how to shape personalities and radio stations. I always remember how, and I say this in the most complimentary way, how anal you were about everything. It was like from the way you read the weather.
The weather, yeah. That was a big thing of mine.
It was a big thing of yours, which, by the way, I have stolen and have used at dozens and dozens of radio stations because it makes a whole lot of sense. So here's the scenario. Don Kelley, veteran programmer, tremendously successful programmer. You've just been hired by an owner. He bought a fabulous signal. There's no signal issues whatsoever. And he said, Don, I want to be number one with this radio station. So forget about budget. My question, Don Kelley, what would you do?
Well, I think I would have live voice tracking with live talent that's around, particularly on weekdays, so that if they need to jump in on something, and that allows you to do a contest too. We did that back at WGTR that way. The talk tape would have your contest. We did a stumper or something other like that. And it would go live and stop at the end. So you had to be in the studio or you get dead air to take a winner. So nobody would know the difference.
So, I was surprised at your answer about the air staff because my answer would have I think
live.
immediately have gone live 24/7, because I think that is radio's secret elixir, maybe.
Sure.
That, when you put it on, there's somebody there live, and they're there. So I was a little surprised that you would still utilize voice tracking a little bit. But
I would think of it. I exactly hear what you say. I would think of it as live assist. You still get the I'm in the studio experience.
I don't know. I just think, that, I mean, and we've both been in radio a long, long, long time now, that, maybe we've gone full circle with, first we had all live people, of course. When we all started out, there was no such thing as automation. So, of course, when you were the program director, the biggest part of your job was scheduling 24/7 bodies in the control room.
Right.
And that's how many of us got started was, nobody else wanted to work the all night shift on the weekend. It was like, okay, I'll do it. And that was how we started. But I wonder, I think actually that it's come full circle now. And, if radio is indeed, and I'm not saying radio's in trouble, but I think if I were designing my station without any limits really on budget, or pretty big limits, pretty wide road there, I would go, with an air staff virtually 24/7, just because, I don't know, I have this thing in my head that when people turn on the radio, they kind of expect somebody to be there.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they do. Yes. Yes. Which is why too much segueing can be a negative. The biggest negative, of course, and if there are no budget issues, then maybe this could be addressed, are too many commercials, of course. And
so what would you do? So, okay. So what would your again, Don, you're in charge now. Okay. And your owner is just this really wealthy guy who just wants it done. He just wants you to make it number one. Tell me your commercial load policy.
Well, when it was at Z100, when they first went on, it was going to have 2 breaks an hour, but charge like for 1 minute and charge $1 bazillion for a spot. So that would be a good idea, because a long time without a commercial interruption plays well with people. That's obvious.
So what's your commercial? Are you doing two pods of 4 each, or?
Not even that, like 2. 2 minutes sounds like I'm back fast. 4 minutes sounds like that's more than a song.
Okay, so you're going to have 2 stop sets with 2 minutes each,
right?
In there. Okay,
right.
So and okay, so we're kind of somewhat voice tracked on the station, somewhat live.
I would want the people to be around, so if there's anything to react to, you know it right away. And that's not just true during the day; it's certainly true at night. Most of the things that people want to be able to, memorable things that happen at night.
Okay, so now let's talk about the Don Kelley research program with your station. Again, owners giving you carte blanche. What kind of lay out what your research looks like? Your perceptual, your music research. What would you do?
Good question. I actually have issues with a lot of the research studies that we did, because the companies doing it would have a rote set of questions. And sometimes they weren't necessarily appropriate, especially if they're trying to track it year to year. The one group we used quite a bit used to have a core satisfaction question they asked. And what percentage of your audience is completely satisfied with everything about the radio station? And I finally made them take that out, saying that's, and they say, oh, it's off 11%. That's stupid. Seriously, who is 100% satisfied with everything about anything? Nobody is.
So,
sure, yeah.
Are you saying that you would do perceptual, but maybe different than they've been done in the past?
Yes. And if you were doing a format finder, by the way, I would have 3 studies to do it, 3 different independent studies. I might even do that with the perceptual, because anybody might slant the results in a certain direction. If they all had different answers, well, let's see. We actually tried that in Philadelphia when that was Mix 95.7 was getting in trouble. And so they wouldn't go for 3, but they did do 2. Okay, and if the answer is that both of them say the same thing, all right, that's probably the answer. If they have completely different answers, maybe the truth is somewhere in between. but I want enough of it so I'm getting multiple opinions, not just one person's spin on things. And yeah.
What would your music research look like in this? I mean, it's been a long time from doing the hotel room full of people scoring songs to now where it's almost exclusively pretty much online right now. How would the Don Kelley music research go?
I would use online heavily. People are used to it. It's much cheaper than pulling people into a hotel room, and the group you get can vary depending on the group you get. Same thing's true with focus groups for that matter. I mean, you can get in a focus group, if there are 12 people sitting there and one is kind of a talker, they can sway the feeling of the room unnecessarily. And if you're not used to watching all these things, you can come back with a bad read. I was doing one down at one of our sister stations I was consulting in New Jersey. And they were concerned that in the focus group, nobody talked about the midday woman who had been there for a while. And they were worried about it. Well, and I said, don't worry about it. They never talk about the midday person. It's the hammock between morning and afternoon drive. That doesn't mean they don't like her. She does a good job on the air. She's a friendly companion. They're used to her. But she's not extreme enough that it's going to come up in conversation. That's the nature of midday, so don't worry about it. And of course, if there's no interference, that helps a lot because oftentimes the corporate interference can get in the way of things that it ought not to. At Magic, when we were first putting our websites up,
Don, it's the two C's: corporate and consultants. Come on. Right. You can say it. That's okay.
When we were putting our websites up, this is 98, 97, something like that. And we had built the whole thing and it was all set, and I'd gotten the URL magic1067.com. And at the last second, the guy who was president of the radio group said, "Oh, you have to use WMJX.com." I've read all these promos and the whole thing's already. Why? He said, because people write call letters most in diaries. And I'm saying, Tom, they used to. I go to when I was in Baltimore, I went to every single book, looked at a ton of diaries. They don't do that anymore. They use frequency. That's what they write this down, is the frequency of the radio station. And that's why we need to use magic1067.com. Now, to keep him quiet, I had to get another WMJX.com that would flip over to it. But what we said on the air needed to be that. And he was basing it on really old research.
So going back to the air staff for a second, talk to me about the kind of talent you would want to put on. Would you want to put on personality? Would you want to put on big names? What kind of talent would you be looking for on our radio station where budget, again, is not that big of an issue?
People who understand who we're talking to, which is probably a female skewed audience.
And if I could just jump in, Don, the one thing I always admired about you, and I told this to many, many people over the years, is that you figured out a way to combine kind of liner cards, but turn them into personality. So they sounded, so everybody, I always felt that every on-air person you had on Magic in Boston was definitely had a personality, but they were pretty disciplined.
They were disciplined, and the goal was that here's the liner that I've spent hours writing. So if you want to change it, you need to make it without making it any longer. If you can improve it a little bit, okay, but don't change any of the cell lines and don't make it any longer.
Perfect segue. And I may put you on the spot now, but okay. So let's say it's Boston. The station's in Boston.
Okay.
Give me your lineup. Who's going to be the Don Kelley Dream Team lineup in 2021 in Boston? Big signal, any one of the major signals. It's yours now. Okay, let's do what do they call this? The lightning round. Morning drive. By the way, you can get anybody you want because you have more money than anybody. So
Tom Bergeron.
Okay, midday.
He did it before. I think for familiarity, I would bring Nancy Quill back.
Okay.
and again, Nancy was one of these. She was smooth, elegant, and really the voice of the radio station. We used her whisper all the time. I used it in a couple of other markets as well.
Okay, so we've got Tom Bergeron,
Yeah,
Nancy Quill, afternoon drive.
I'm trying to think. Is there anybody? I mean, it's easy for me to bring back the people that I had, and
right.
So my first reaction is to say Dan Justin and Candy O'Terry in the afternoon.
Right. Oh, like a team. Do a team.
Yeah, right.
I like that.
Often they were. I mean, she would do traffic and weather, but they actually had a very good rapport with each other, and people commented on that. I would put Boucher on at night.
I was just going to say I could probably guess who you would put on at night.
But one thing I do differently with Boucher is let him do what he did earlier on. He's been handcuffed a lot lately because, and I understand why. You know, if you take a show like Boucher and send it off to an awards competition someplace, it's never going to win anything because you've taken it out of the context of what he is, and people don't get it. They think, well, he's got all this dead air, and he's, you know, they'll say, I'd like to ask you, and Boston accent stuff, but everybody knows who he is, and he's been there a long time, and he would just like to keep doing it, and he's what he is.
I'm thinking I would go to put a team on every shift, like say Tom Bergeron and maybe Gay Vernon, for instance, because Gay was always very, very good, you know.
Yep. And good with him, yeah.
And good with him. And then in midday, I'd put Nancy on with maybe somebody else, you know, who would kind of, you know, who would kind of be the sidekick person, but also maybe doing some traffic reports during the day. And, you know, especially now with you know, after this pandemic, it seems like the world is getting started much later. So daytime.
Yeah.
You know, and then in the afternoon, I like the idea of Dan Justin or Mike Adams, for that matter. You know, would be great with Candy, you know, in there. And then you know, I would let David fly solo because
Mike would be great. I think of him as a morning guy, of course, but he has done plenty of afternoons. Actually, that's a good one. Mike Adams, in terms of the easiest morning guy I ever had to work with, that's Mike Adams. Usually, the morning guy, if he's good, is also a pain. He's as cooperative and easy to deal with and consistent as anybody I ever met.
What is your marketing plan going to look like on your unlimited budget, great signaled, big 50,000 watt radio station?
Yeah, that's tricky. We always used to pound TV until they cut it out of the budget, and then I
mean, Magic was probably famous. I think Magic was famous for a lot of things, but I mean, I certainly remember in the early days, we were spending over $1 million a year on TV.
Yeah.
It was unheard of.
Yeah, it was a lot.
You know?
And when that started, when I got there was already $1 million marketing budget, but it was being split up into little direct mail and a couple of billboards here and there, and little bus things there. And I had really picked this up from my GM in Baltimore, Bob Lind. He said, and we did a ton of TV there, and he said, there's all these different things you can do for marketing. We should pick one and own it.
Right, concentration.
That makes absolute sense, yeah.
Yeah, concentration of force, yeah.
It's tough to own TV these days. You know, TV stations are having the same struggle newspapers are, and sometimes radio stations, because there are so many streaming services and other ways to. I mean, I hardly ever watch a network TV show anymore. This is a good point. So given what's going on in 21 with, you know, less network viewership of local TV stations, I know my kids don't know the difference. They go, local TV stations, what is that? Yeah.
You know, they don't know Channel 4, WBZ TV. You know, they don't know that. They just, you know what they know. So what would your marketing budget for your station look like? Where would you, if you were going to go under the guise of concentration of force, where would you put that concentration?
What I would do is go anywhere where people are absorbing audio. And, you know, it's a big one. I would think about having individual personalities be on TikTok.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that we didn't really talk about. What's your view of the relationship between your new station and social media?
Well, it has to be part of it. I mean, that's how people, especially in the what's now the demo, the younger end of the demo, absorb their information. That's how they do it. So anywhere where people absorb audio is where I would go to market, including social media, all the big ones, of course, and TikTok. You have individual accounts of the personalities on TikTok. I don't think I'd do outdoor unless it was lit up. There are some markets have more than others. We have just a few here. I don't think I'd do bus backs, although we did a ton of them when TV was cut out. We were like every bus.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. back in the day at Magic, I think you guys were all over everything that mattered.
Yeah.
If it mattered, then you were all over it. You were all over network television.
There'd be a lead story on the evening news of some murder in wherever, and they show the police at the scene and the flashing lights, and in the background, here's a bus with Magic all over the back. Direct mail is ancient history. But digital stuff is all over the place. Anything you can do where people go, and I would ask that a lot in focus groups. And you can find out from, the Fred Jacobs tech survey thing is very helpful in understanding what's growing and what isn't in terms of usage. And I use that a lot to figure out where to go for marketing.
Sometimes I wonder, you mentioned about direct mail. I sometimes wonder if direct mail might not be a good alternative now, only from the standpoint that everybody feels that it doesn't matter anymore. And it's almost like getting something in the mail is almost like exciting. I find that when I go get my mail, there's not nearly as much as there used to be.
Yeah.
Like if I get a letter from somebody, I'm kind of excited about it. What is it? What is this? So I wonder if direct mail might have a rebirth down the road. Since
I always thought the return was awfully low, and they would say if you get a 2% bump, that's considered a good return. If you have a really huge contest and you could get up to 5 or 6%, that's really a home run. But there's so many problems with the mail these days. You hear stories about people mailing things that you're supposed to get there in 2 days and it gets there in 3 weeks.
Yeah, or 3 months.
Yeah, 3. Yeah.
I got it. My birthday is in January, and somebody sent me a birthday card. I got it about a week ago.
Yeah, right.
And they sent it first class from Florida. And I just got it. Well, there you have it. What Don Kelley would do if he could build a radio station with no limits. And even though most, if not all of us, have budget limits, this may be the best way to look at and build our radio stations. If you have ideas on what you would do and would like to be on a future segment of What Would You Do, please let me know. Reach out on email, gary@garyburke.com, or on any of my social media platforms. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and you'll be notified every time I publish a new video. Or follow me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. My thanks to Don Kelley for being with me on this first edition of What Would You Do? I'm AC Programming Specialist Gary Berkowitz, and as always, I do thank you for watching.
Welcome to Berkowitz Broadcast Consulting.